Recently here on Nixium, I made a video called Why Do People Love Classic WoW So Much? This old as dirt version of World of Warcraft, why is it so appealing to people 20 years after it came out? Why are people still playing it in 2025? Well, I went over kind of a general list of arguments as to why people tend to prefer this version of World of Warcraft and why they play it, and needless to say, you guys seemed to have really enjoyed that video, judging by the amount of views that this video got. But a common question that keeps popping up, not only in that comment section on the YouTube video, but also on my live streams whenever I'm live on Twitch throughout the week, is this is cool that you have this list of these general topics as to why people tend to like Classic, but why do you play Classic WoW, Nixium? What is so appealing about the game to you personally? And so I wanted to answer that question through a series of videos called Why I Love Classic WoW So Much, starting with this video where I'm going to talk about one of the first things that I fell in love with so much when it came to Classic, and that is the world itself. This series of videos are of course going to just be my personal opinions. It's going to be my love letter to Classic WoW, and I hope that a lot of the stuff that I say maybe you'll agree with, maybe some of the stuff I'll say you'll disagree with, but I guess we're gonna find out. These are just my opinions about the world of Classic WoW and why I enjoy it so damn much. Before we dive into the video though, we have to thank this channel's sponsor, Zygor. Zygor is World of Warcraft's ultimate add-on and also the sponsor for this channel, so I wanted to give them a quick shout out real fast. If you're looking for awesome leveling guides, achievement farming guides, mount collecting, gold making, you name it guys, check out Zygor today, link down below in the description. And after trying out Zygor's free version, if you decide to upgrade to full, be sure to use Nixium for 20% off. Thanks guys. There are several points that I would like to make about the world of Classic and why it is so beloved by me so damn much, and none of them are in any particular order, but I think I would like to begin with the scale of the world. This will be number one, because this was the first thing that hooked me to the game all the way back in 2005. A long time ago, I heard about World of Warcraft for the very first time, and this was the first time that I had ever been told about an MMORPG, this idea of another world within a computer, and it just blew my mind. And for the longest time, I was not able to play WoW because we didn't have a good enough computer at my family home, so I just sort of admired WoW whenever I walked past it in Walmart in the PC games section. But one day, my friend Ben, for some reason, he decided to play World of Warcraft for the first time, even though he was a really big Star Wars Galaxies enthusiast, and he let me play on his account just to let me try the game out and see what I thought about it. My first ever character in WoW was technically a Forsaken Warlock, just because I thought undead and warlocks sounded really cool, and I remember emerging out from the crypt in Death Knell and hitting the M key. I wanted to see this map of the world. And I looked at Tirisfal Glades and I thought, wow, like this place is so huge, it's massive. And then my friend Ben told me to right click. So I did, and then suddenly I had this whole map of the Eastern Kingdoms open to me with my tiny little character marker in the upper left-hand corner. And I was blown away by like just the sheer scale of this world that I was about to explore. And then Ben told me, right click again. And of course, that is when I got to see the whole of the world, Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. This blew my mind, and it still blows my mind to this day. Classic WoW is obviously a giant game for anybody that has played it, and it is mind-blowing that you can hop on a flight path from Teldrassil and fly all the way down to Silithus at the bottom of Kalimdor. These flight paths can sometimes take over 16 minutes. The game world is just so large and it's so packed with so much content, and this leads me into my second point that relates to the scale of Classic WoW, and that is there's no invisible walls. So I really hate invisible walls in MMORPGs, or just like a cliff or like a barrier that you can't walk over. I've always been someone that, like, if I see something, I want to be able to go over there and climb that hill and get up there in theory and look around because it's part of the world itself. And many MMOs like Star Wars Galaxies and ESO and others, unfortunately, don't really give you this experience. Classic WoW, on the other hand, does allow you to do these things. It doesn't have these stupid invisible barriers everywhere or just like terrain cliffs that you can't go past. Now, I know what some of you guys are going to say, like, well, you know, if you're looking at two zones in Classic, usually there's like a barrier of mountains between them or something. And that is true, but the thing is those mountains are not hiding a nothingness in the game world behind them like in other MMOs or even single player RPGs. No, like if you climb up to the top of those mountains, if you were able to fly up there and put your character standing on the top, you would see a whole world on the other side or an ocean or something. It's not like there's just the game world ends once you get up there. And this gives to the world, again, that sense of scale. Like you are getting the whole of the world, not just a piece of the world, which in my opinion is very frustrating when it comes to MMOs because it doesn't feel like you're actually in the world itself. Kind of makes you feel like you're in a video game. I know some of you guys are probably going to crucify me in the comment section for saying that, but when it comes to an MMO, immersion is a pretty big deal. So if you're just hitting invisible walls left and right and these terrain barriers that, you know, there's nothing beyond them, you're not allowed to go over there, it just kind of reminds you that you're playing a video game. You're not actually in a World of Warcraft. And this leads to my third point in regards to the world of Classic WoW, and that is an extreme lack of loading screens. So I just said 1 second ago that Classic WoW gave to you the entire world. You can walk from Tirisfal Glades all the way to Stranglethorn Vale, the very bottom of it, and you will not hit a single loading screen on the entire path. And that is mind-blowing. Again, in other MMOs that just kind of give you little chunks of the world, being able to go from one part of the continent all the way to the other is wild. Now, granted, there is loading screens if you were to go from Eastern Kingdoms to Kalimdor, you know, whatever. But I mean, how often are you going to do that? If you're a Forsaken and you finally leave Tirisfal Glades and Silverpine Forest, you make your way over to Durotar via the Zeppelin, okay, there's a loading screen. But then you make your way to the Barrens, you're questing there for a while in Stone Talon Mountains, all around that general area, and maybe sometimes you'll go back to the Undercity. Maybe you'll go back to, you know, Eastern Kingdoms for an SFK run or something like that. But the amount of time that you spend on a loading screen in Classic WoW is so pathetically minimal that it just continues to reinforce this idea subconsciously that you are in this world. You're not in some game. And I really, really enjoy that about Classic WoW. And it's something that I find a little disappointing about the modern game, like just how many loading screens there are and how much time we spend looking at artwork as we're transported automatically into dungeons and across different zones and so on and so forth. And I don't know, it's a little immersion breaking, but that's just a personal opinion of mine. But with the fourth point, I would like to talk about the zones in particular, and that is number 4, each zone in Classic WoW has its own unique personality. This is something that I don't know if Blizzard intentionally did this with their game design or if it was a complete accident. But if you really think about it, every zone in Classic WoW has its own unique culture and vibe to it. Let me explain. If I say, for example, Hillsbrad Foothills, the first thing that's probably going to pop into your mind is the world PvP between Terran Mill and South Shore, as well as some pretty fun quests if you're Horde, killing all the Hillsbrad farmers, the councilmen, as well as those elite dwarves in the lower right-hand corner of the zone. This is where Arthas killed his father. This is where Scarlet Monastery is located, which is like this rite of passage series of dungeons in Classic WoW. If I say STV, you think about rogues hiding behind trees ready to gank you. Duskwood, you have Stitches. Silverpine Forest, you have the Sons of Arugal wandering around. Barrens has the Barrens chat, and on it goes, so on and so forth. Every single zone in Classic WoW has like its own unique culture and personality to it, and something that really makes it unique and special to the point that you actually look forward to getting to certain zones in Classic. It's always fun to get to Westfall, for example, because Westfall has some amazing questing in it. It's great to get to Loch Modan because Loch Modan is absolutely beautiful. Everybody dreads getting to the Badlands because the Badlands absolutely sucks dick. You know what I'm talking about? Like, this is something that made Classic WoW so special. Just the world is so rich with its character. And this leads me to point number 5 in regards to all these different zones throughout the world, and that is that all the zones are different from one another. It's very rare in Classic WoW that two zones feel similar. Like, I'll joke, like in my recent Forsaken experience video, about how many dry and dusty zones there are in Kalimdor. The Barrens and Thousand Needles and Tanaris and Silithus and so on and so forth. But you know, humor and sarcasm and silliness aside, even these dry and dusty zones all feel very different from one another in, again, that personality and culture, but also in the types of quests that you will do in these zones and the experiences that you'll have. Some of the zones that you'll play through are even from previous Warcraft RTS titles, whereas others are creations of the Blizzard devs during the Classic WoW production phase. Each zone tends to have its own unique color palette to separate it from the zones around it. Each zone tends to have its own kind of unique style of questing. Some zones have a lot more elite quests in them. Some zones have a lot more grindy quests. Some zones have more collection quests, so on and so forth. And this is something that, again, makes the Classic WoW zone experience and design so memorable and enjoyable to go through. And like I said with the personality point, because the zones are all so unique, you really tend to look forward to getting to particular zones in your questing experience. For some strange reason, I am one of the few people on this planet that actually really enjoys getting to Stone Talon Mountains. Some of you guys really look forward to Tanaris. Some people love Ungoro Crater, and this is just something that Classic WoW just excels in. And you know, for my 6th point for why I love the Classic WoW world so much, I'm actually going to talk about something that doesn't relate to the zones themselves, but things that exist between the zones. So something that I love about Classic WoW in regards to its exploration is the hidden unnecessary locations in the world. I don't know why Blizzard did this, but they clearly invested a lot of time during Classic WoW's development into creating all of these little places in Classic WoW that nobody should have ever in theory, been able to reach. There's a lot of famous places in Classic WoW that are technically off limits to the player base, or at least you gotta go really far off the beaten path in order to see them. You've got famous places like if you can manage to get into Mount Hyjal, you can hop down the mountains in Felwood and get your way into the Darkshore Troll Village. Everybody loves that location. There's the entire zone above Ironforge if you can wall hop your way up there. This is actually one of my favorite locations in Classic WoW, the mountains above Ironforge. You have an entire air base up there, first and foremost. You have these little camps that are located here and there in the snowdrift, and then even Ironforge Mountain itself has all these neat little things at the summit of the mountain. It's almost like Blizzard didn't design these things to be accessible, but it's like they knew that the players were somehow going to find their way to get on top of Ironforge Mountain somehow through just the madness of game design. They're gonna find a way. And so Blizzard put these little things in between all the zones and all these little things like scattered throughout the world for players to find. And it's always cool when, at least in my experience, when maybe even 19 or 20 years later, you're playing Classic WoW and you find something that you have never seen before and it blows your mind. Speaking of which, if you guys would like to see some of these hidden locations in Classic WoW that maybe you might have missed, I made 2 videos some time ago talking about all the hidden locations in Classic WoW, and I'll link them at the end of this video, as well as a little card up in the corner if you're an explorer like I am and you want to check those out. And last but not least, my 7th point, the thing that made me really fall in love with the Classic WoW world was just how dangerous it was. One thing that people want when it comes to an MMORPG or just a role-playing game in general is to feel like they are on an adventure. And if you want to create a very memorable and fun, adventurous experience, there needs to be a bit of an element of danger. This applies even to real life as well. Maybe you guys have traveled to a foreign country like I have and lived over there by yourself. Or maybe you've been to the third world. Like, I spent some time in Africa at one point building a school out there. And yeah, it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit intimidating, but that's what makes it special. And I think that Classic WoW captures this adventurous feeling because the world is dangerous. Not all of it, but as you quest, you are going to encounter mobs with powerful abilities that could easily send you to the nearest graveyard. There will be packs of mobs stacked closely together in some zones. There's patrols that you have to keep your eyes out for, and of course, there is elites. There are entire areas of Classic WoW that you quite literally cannot go to unless you have a group because there's so many elites present in the outdoor world. For example, the giant troll ruins in Hillsbrad Foothills, it's pretty much a dungeon, an outdoor dungeon like Wailing Caverns or RFC, but there's no loading screen into it. It's just get a group together and climb the troll ruins. It's great. And it's this dangerous nature of the world that makes the adventure just all the more worth it, more memorable, and it really adds to that feeling of accomplishment whenever you get a new piece of gear or you make it to level 60 and you feel like you're becoming more powerful or you feel like you've conquered the challenges of the world. I know there's people out there that are going to say that Classic WoW is not that challenging, and I'm not trying to say that the game is Dark Souls or Elden Ring or something, but there is certainly a challenge to the world. There is a necessity to group up with other players in order to accomplish quests and objectives, and if Classic WoW was a total cakewalk, then you probably wouldn't have died 25 times attempting Classic WoW Hardcore.